If you're thinking about selling but haven't pulled the trigger yet, there's a good chance you're waiting for something. Maybe you're waiting for the spring market. Maybe you're waiting for rates to come down. Maybe you're waiting for the market to stabilize, whatever that means to you. Or maybe you're just waiting because it feels safer to wait, and I understand that instinct. Waiting feels conservative. It feels responsible. It feels like you're protecting yourself by not acting until conditions are clearly in your favor. But here's what I've watched happen over and over again. Sellers wait, conditions shift, sometimes in their favor and sometimes not. And by the time they act, the landscape has changed in ways that they didn't account for. Not dramatically, subtly, but subtly enough to cost them real money. In this video, I want to walk through why waiting for the right time is almost never as safe as it feels, and what sellers should actually be paying attention to instead. I'm Cucoch from Royal LePage Signature, and I run a real estate team in the Toronto West and Mississauga areas. So if you're ready, whenever you're ready, there's a link in the description. If you'd look to book a discovery call with me, go ahead and click the link. I'm happy to chat. Okay, let's start with why waiting feels so appealing. When the market feels uncertain, doing nothing feels like the safest option. You can't make a mistake if you hadn't made a move. That's the logic. And in some areas of life, it's good logic. If you're unsure about a major purchase, sleeping on it is smart. If you're uncertain about a career change, taking time to think is reasonable. But real estate doesn't work the same way, because when you wait, the market doesn't wait with you, it keeps moving. New listings appear, old listings expire or reduce, buyer behavior adjusts, comparable sales happen, and they reset expectations for everyone. Every week that passes, the competitive landscape shifts. Sometimes the shift is small, sometimes it's significant, but it's never frozen. And that's the part that sellers who are waiting tend to underestimate. They assume the market they're watching today will be the market they enter later, and that's almost never the case. Here's the first big misconception. Sellers tend to overestimate how much conditions will improve in their favor. They're waiting for a better market. But what does that actually mean? More buyers? Maybe, but more buyers also means more sellers listing at the same time, which increases competition. Lower rates? Perhaps, but lower rates brings more buyers into the market, which sounds good until you realize it also brings more listings, because those same conditions encourage other sellers to act too. Higher prices? Possibly, but price appreciation in real estate doesn't happen in a vacuum. It's accompanied by shifting buyer expectations, new inventory, and evolving comparables. The point is, the better market sellers are imagining is rarely a clean upgrade. It's a different market with different dynamics and often different challenges that replace the ones you were trying to avoid. Sellers picture waiting as standing still while the market improves around them. In reality, it's more like standing still on a moving sidewalk. The ground shifts under you even when you don't take a step. Let's talk about cost, not the obvious costs, mortgage payments, property taxes, maintenance, and utilities. Those are real and they add up, but most sellers already account for them. I'm talking about the invisible costs, the ones that sellers don't see until they've already paid them. The first invisible cost is comp erosion. Every month that passes, new comparable sales occur. These new comps reset when buyers expect to pay in your area. If a similar home to yours sells for less than what you were planning to list at, that sale becomes the new benchmark, not your plan, the market's most recent data point, and buyers' agents will use it. So the price you could have gotten 3 months ago may not be the price you can get today, not because your home changed, but because the evidence around it changed. The second invisible cost is inventory positioning. When you wait, other sellers act. Some of them are listing homes that will directly compete with yours. If a better condition, better outpriced home enters your comparison set while you're still waiting, you're now in a weaker position than you would have been before. You didn't do anything wrong, you just lost a competitive advantage you didn't even know you had. The third invisible cost is buyer fatigue. Buyers who've been actively searching for months become more discriminating, not less. They've seen more homes, they've refined their preferences, and they're harder to impress. So by the time you enter the market, the buyer pool may be more experienced and more demanding than it was when you first started thinking about selling. None of these costs show up on a spreadsheet, but they all affect your outcome. When I talk to sellers who are waiting, I usually ask them a simple question. What specifically are you waiting for? And most of the time, the answer is vague. We're waiting for things to get better. We're waiting for the spring market. We want to see what rates do. Those aren't strategies, they're hopes. And I don't say that to be harsh. I say that because hope isn't a decision framework. If you're going to wait, you should be waiting for something specific, something measurable. Something that, when it happens, clearly signals that now is the time to act. Otherwise, what you're really doing is avoiding a decision. And decision avoidance has its own cost. Because while you're waiting for a signal that may never arrive in a form you expect, the market continues to price in new information. Every sale that closes, every listing that expires, every rate announcement, every new development or rezoning application, all of that data gets absorbed by the market in real time. So the right time you're waiting for isn't a fixed point on a calendar. It's a moving target. And moving targets are very difficult to time correctly. Let me address one of the most common versions of this. We'll wait for the spring market. Spring is where most sellers believe the market is strongest. And historically, spring does tend to bring more activity, more buyers, more showings, more transactions. But it also brings significantly more inventory. More sellers listing at the same time means more competition. And more competition means your home has to work harder to stand out. So yes, the pool of buyers is bigger in the spring, but the pool of listings is bigger too. And in many cases, the ratio doesn't actually improve. There are sellers who would have performed better listing in February with less competition than in April with more. The spring market isn't a guaranteed advantage. It's a different competitive environment. And whether it's better for you depends entirely on your specific home, your comparison set, and how the inventory around you is shaping up. That's a strategic question, not a calendar question. Here's the fundamental misunderstanding. Sellers think waiting reduces risk. It doesn't. It rearranges risk. When you list, you take on the risk of market exposure. When you wait, you take on the risk of market change. Neither option is risk-free. The question isn't, how do I avoid risk? It's, what set of risk am I better positioned to manage? And that's a question most sellers never ask. They assume inaction is neutral, but it isn't. Inaction is a decision with its own consequences. You're choosing the risks of waiting over the risks of acting. And in a market that moves constantly, the risks of waiting are often larger than sellers realize. Not because something catastrophic happens, but because small incremental shifts accumulate quietly. A comp here, a new listing there, a slight buyer preference change that makes your home feel slightly less competitive than it would have been 2 months ago. None of it is dramatic, but all of it matters. So what should sellers who aren't ready to list right now actually be doing? Not nothing, and not just watching the market from the sidelines hoping for a clear signal. What they should be doing is building strategic clarity, understanding exactly where their home sits in the current competitive landscape, knowing what their comparison set looks like, knowing what buyers in their segment are responding to, knowing what their home-specific strengths and friction points are. Because if you're going to wait, you should at least understand what you're waiting for. Not a feeling, not a season, a specific strategic condition that would meaningfully improve your outcome. And once you can define that, you can actually evaluate whether waiting makes sense or whether the right time is closer than you think. Most sellers who go through that exercise discover something surprising. The thing that they were waiting for either already happened or it's not the variable that matters most. What actually matters is alignment. How well their home is positioned relative to the current market. And alignment can be created. It doesn't need to be waited for. If you're in that in-between space, thinking about selling but not sure when, I suggest starting with clarity rather than timing. That's what the Strategic Listing Readiness Review is built for. It's not a push to list immediately. It's a clear-eyed look at where your home stands today, what the competitive landscape actually looks like, what waiting would need to accomplish to meaningfully change your position, and whether the timing question you're wrestling with even has the answer you think it does. If that kind of clarity would help you make a more confident decision, there's a link in the description. The market rarely rewards patience the way sellers imagine. It rewards preparation, it rewards alignment, and most of all, it rewards decisions made with real information instead of assumptions about what the future will look like. In the next video, I'll break down why pricing just a little high can do more damage in the first 2 weeks than most sellers expect.